the idea of the way I think, which has always been macro value, and you're thinking quant AI, are not necessarily in a disagreement, because I don't believe
there might actually be. It's kind of like, you got your chocolate and my peanut butter. No, you get your
right.
peanut butter and my chocolate.
Well, it's an interesting thought. It's conceptually at odds, but I think actually very complementary. But I think that the peanut butter and chocolate analogy, but and I hate to get existential, but it's like Pascal in faith and Christianity and mathematics. Here's a mathematician like Erasmus or Pascal. These are incredibly Cartesian, logical-minded men who were so logical, and yet because of the extreme wisdom of their mathematical minds and their logical minds, they saw the scientific inevitability, in a sense, of going beyond science. In other words, going into faith, because it made sense that there was a limit to logic. I don't think there's a limit to AI or a limit to fundamentals. I think what we both agree on is natural price discovery, natural supply and demand dynamics, natural market conditions have died long ago. They did, in my opinion. They disappeared after 2008 in particular, but probably after 1987 in general, when Greenspan came in. Well, that's an intellectual debate, but we no longer have classic capitalism or Adam Smith forces at work in these markets. And without, blaming which Fed chairman or which regime, it's clear that you need something more.
Do you think Trump can hide his invisible hand?
Or Powell or Greenspan, Yellen or Bernanke.
He's going to Photoshop the invisible hand to make it bigger.
It's remarkable, but I think with that loss of faith in natural market forces, which have been replaced, at least temporarily, for well over a decade by unnatural support, you need a system that's either cynical and capable of trading in these fundamentals that are broken, or you need an AI quant-based system that is programmed, designed, and managed to handle this system. What's key to the success of that model, though, is I think you're valuing risk management more than your wins, especially
we're definitely managing or valuing risk management. You can't.
And you're valuing it, but you're prioritizing it. You have to prioritize.
Portfolio construction math, where you actually have to understand how to measure value at risk the right way, and how to look at correlation, not only about when you're making money, but when you're losing money, or when you're putting trades on, or there's so many different ways to measure correlation.
Even VAR is kind of obsolete in the complexities of these markets. The old traditional risk tools are less effective. I'm not saying they're obsolete; they're still essential, but you almost need more. But you have to begin with the basics.
I'm going to tell you that the real opportunity, in my sense, is to take the timeless wisdom of the past, okay, and to apply it to the new technology that hasn't become commonplace. And so when I'm looking at certain techniques, I try to imagine, would that have helped me 10 years ago?
Well,
I still think that's going to hold true 10 years from now. There are certain things that aren't going to change. And if you can find a way to focus on what doesn't change, all the stuff that does is noise.
Well, that's I would put that on the cover of your prospectus, actually. The timeless lessons of the past with the best technology of the future. Because if you understand the timeless lessons of mean reversion, for example, or the key way to make money is not to lose money. In other words, you can't have a 30, 40, 50% drawdown, because you need to be 60 to 80% up just to get that back. So if you have a modern technology model that respects making money by not losing money first, and then winning big when you win big, slow and steady with technology, you're going to outshine every strategy, because you understand old school parameters with new school technology. That's your selling point.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
So that's not only a selling point, it's actually the way
it's a winning strategy.
Alpha.
Yeah, right? it's an alpha strategy. I mean, it's not only a selling point, but it's understandable by old school, frustrated anachronisms who don't want to accept the future, right? Yeah. Because they distrusted it. It's one big Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk hype show. But no, it's much more than that. Technology is better than Facebook and Tesla. There's something great about technology. But people who don't understand it will distrust it, and they'll go back to old school thinking. What you're saying is old school thinking that's timeless. That part we incorporate. But what's more important is we take out the interference of emotion and arrogance, and we put in the advantage of technology.
But you know what else we do? I'll tell you, there was a silly kind of jokey story about a lady who went to visit her mother, or the mother came to visit the daughter, and she said, "Oh, I'm making brisket the way you used to." She says, I have your old recipe. I do everything the same. Look, I even cut the ends off." And the mother's like, "Why do you do that?" She says, "You always cut the end off." And the mother said, "Yeah, because our oven was so small that that's the only way it fit."
Right.
So part of timeless wisdom is knowing what to keep, but also what to get rid of. Just because somebody did something for many years, even if they made money, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the reason they made money. And the practical realities of time, technology, or competition mean that if you've done the same thing for 6 months or a year, chances are there's probably something better. Now, timeless wisdom for me is something that you can chunk up to a point of agreement, but how you actually execute the strategy or the tactic in real time may change over time, but the concept remains timeless.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that approach. And again, I think that's a Nietzschean notion that you constantly overcome yourself on what you're going forward. You can still base yourself on timeless ideas, but the approach into these new frontiers, which you are now on, has to be constantly evolutionary. You know, it just does. And it's beyond my math, though. Conceptually, I think if you put these pieces together, it's gonna. And again,
but again, that's why you use AI, because it's beyond everybody's math. It's too many combinations. It's now something that you actually. And frankly, if you're doing that much scale, you're compounding error. So you got to make sure you're doing the right math on the right type of data using the right equation, because just because you did the math right and you got an answer doesn't mean it's the right answer.
What's interesting is, though, and I'm hearing you, and we're almost two different ships coming to the same conclusion, but the focus on AI, it's just like Bitcoin versus gold for currency risk. It almost doesn't matter. You need cavalry and artillery to win a battle, whether it's Bitcoin or gold. The same idea is you don't trust currency risk in a monetary system. So you have to hedge it through digital or gold currency. You're going through an AI approach. I think we'll probably each reach a similar promised land in two ways. You don't trust the mind's ability to trade rationally in these markets, so you have an AI system that is optimized to beat markets based on timeless notions and new technology. On the same
fair comparisons and an objective framework to put the data that you have to make new conclusions.
But we have an equal distrust in the human mind, though, and especially in the mass mind, and it's certainly in the elite mind, because I don't respect anymore, after 25 years in this business, the best PMs or the best Fed chairman, European, American, elsewhere. I think it's so inevitable, the failure of the system, that I am the one-trick pony waiting for its failure, in the meantime grabbing a little bit of alpha. To me, the big opportunity comes 5 minutes, 5 years from now, when this thing tanks, and I just simply ride it.
So I realize this is going to get
we could go all day on this
for a second, but hear me out for a moment. In personal development work, one of the most important things that somebody realizes that they don't have to be a victim.
Right.
They can be the creator, and in a sense, you control what you focus on, what you make it mean, and what you do. And in a form of mindfulness is to recognize that there's no one objective truth. If 10 people saw a car accident, you'd have 10 people describe it different ways.
Right.
But likewise, if somebody says, well, this is the best next step, somebody else might have a different one. And you can use archetypes as part of that. You would realize, look, a warrior in this situation would say, this is the best step. But the philosopher king might say this is, and if you were the advisor to the king, you might say this is. And in a sense, mindfulness is the ability to watch your thinking and to say, so let me sub-optimize and say, what's the best decision this way, this way, this way, this way, or that way? But then to be able to say, but what role would create the best outcome? And in a sense, what those scenarios are doing, or what AI is letting us do, is actually create a new form of enlightened trading, because instead of confirming our bias and simply looking for something to shoot at, we have the ability to calculate and come up with an answer, even if we don't do anything with it other than use it as information in the system, and to ultimately say, that's worth doing. And in a sense, that's what creates a meaningful life, but that's also what creates meaningful returns. Well, I really appreciate you spending this time with me. Thanks.
Oh, look, I love talking markets and different strategies because like I said, I write about them all the time. I was telling my son, it keeps my knife sharp. I actually am fascinated by this.
So if I wanted to share your blogger writings with users or readers, where would they go?
Just signalsmatter.com. And it's just a free website for thoughts. It's my version of my own zero hedge. And I literally write thousands of pages a year. And it's almost arrogant to assume that I know this much, but I think it's just like if you're a good pitcher and you can throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, you just have a good fastball. You just, it is what it is. Doesn't mean you hit a home run, but I know my fastball is good, right? So what I do know about bond and credit markets and macros is pretty good. And so to me, it's fairly obvious it's going to rain. It's very difficult, and this is simplified, when it rains, what time of the day. But the rain is so obvious, the risk is so immense. And I look at people so excited about this market surge, but they don't realize they're still net below their returns. This year to date, they still haven't made money. They went down. They're so excited about this V-shaped recovery, but they've forgotten what happened in March and April. They've lost. So many people have lost so much money. They've lost confidence in themselves, their advisors, their brokers, their trades. And now they're celebrating with pom-poms about this recovery, which is for so many reasons, a misleading recovery. And yet, the bottom line is they've lost money anyway. I'm saying your strategy didn't have to lose that money to make money. Mine didn't either. And I'm not celebrating like an arrogant victor at the quarterback dance. I'm just saying this was so easy to foresee anyway. It's like a cavity to a dentist. If you understand certain things, like you understand your system, I understand my system, it's much less complex and maybe less effective in the long run. But I do know where the bond yields go and where interest rates go, the markets will go. That's an old trick too, the cost of debt. And the other thing that we both have to think about, whether you're making 15%, 8%, 2% a year, which is far better than losing 40 or 60%. But the one thing, regardless of the success of your model, mine, or anyone else's, and hopefully yours, because you're cutting a new frontier. But let's just say you're up 18% 1 year. That's fantastic. 2, 3, 4 years old. That's compounding fantastic. But the problem I'm thinking of as we step outside of even that box is, what if we have actual 11, 12% inflation? So then our nominal and real returns are very different. What about the actual value of the goddamn currency we have, no matter how much we optimize it in the markets? There's that bigger question, outside of that. Again, we could finally choose squab over squid over veal on the Titanic, but the damn iceberg is still in front of the boat. We don't want to forget that. And so I think even as we make 15, 20%, if we make $1 million into $1.5 million this year, that $1.5 million we made, or that 500,000 we made, its purchasing power is disappearing by the second every moment we're making and optimizing dollar gains. And that's another larger question we have to face. And then that's a more macro question. But, in the backdrop of all of this, mathematical, intellectual, and macro thinking is the larger issue here. It's like, Germany can win 6 battles, but they're clearly going to lose the war. Robert E. Lee can win Fredericksburg, but he's going to lose the war. That's the bottom line. If we make return, but our currency gets neutered and diluted over the next 15 years, we have millions of dollars that don't buy the same thing it did 5 years ago. These are the kinds I'm always thinking about. So even that's another concern. So you have to think at many levels. And, that's why, to answer your question, I write about this stuff all the time. Because in addition to the markets that nauseate me with their lack of, and when I listen to Jay Powell, it literally makes me feel I'm listening to a Soviet propaganda speech. It's so bad. And it angers me. It feels like Goebbels or the NKVD. It's so bad to me. Like, again, if you know what you know and I try to pretend I know it, you're going to be insulted by my attempt to pretend. You're going to know. If I speak know English and I tell you I speak English, the moment I open my mouth and I can't speak English, you're going to feel offended. When I see things that are obvious, it offends me when people pretend. And I think Powell is pretending for good reasons, maybe. But my my point is, I write all the time because it's almost a way to quench, to vent, because I feel like even though I maybe only have 4,000 readers or 500 subscribers who pay thousands of dollars, it makes me good money. But more importantly, I don't want them to get suckered. I know whatever I say at least is honest. That I can say.
All right. Well, this was so much fun. Thanks again, and
All right, Howard.
talk to you soon.
Okay, buddy. Talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.